Good afternoon. I hope you can all hear me, and we can really get started on the whole process today. Um, if we look through, we can see what our aims are. I think we've gone through this now, so that we're all established, and I think most people could hear, which is great. Obviously, we will go through some of the things again as they come up, just to remind you about what you're supposed to be doing at certain times. Okay, so the aims and objectives of this session today. I'm going to go through two of the internally assessed units for the GCSE Leisure and Tourism qualification, looking specifically at what took place over the June series, and just to take some questions as and when they come up. Some of them are coming through. What I'll tend to do is go some way through, and then when we build up a little bank of 3 or 4, I'll probably take a break at a reasonable time and then go through them at that point. So I hope that suits everybody when we do that. Okay, so I'm going to explore the assessment criteria. I'm going to look at some examples of assessment materials. We're going to carry out some marking practice exercises, and then we will look at common issues and frequently asked questions. So I hope that makes sense and it's what you wanted to do today. This is a rough idea of the session agenda. It's probably pretty rough, actually, and what I would say is that I will be moving on to Unit 4 at 5:10, regardless of where we've got to. So the first bit we'll start with planning, then we'll look at Unit 2, and then we'll look at Unit 4. So my aim is really to split the session between the two units. So I hope that makes sense. I appreciate that some of you may just be doing Unit 2, or some of you may just be doing Unit 4, but I'm just taking them in order. So I hope that makes sense to you. Okay, Mel, do you want to bring on the first poll that we asked for about how long people have been doing the specification? If you wouldn't mind giving me a quick vote on this, it's really just to establish how many of you are experienced and how many of you are really starting from the beginning. So if you could just have a little vote on my poll, please. Okay, Mel, do you want to broadcast those so everybody can see? So we're really quite split between those of you who've been doing it since, it's about 50-50 actually. Some of you have been doing it since 2009, and quite a few of you have just started this September. So that's quite a good broad spectrum. So hopefully the people who have been teaching this since 2009 will be able to also throw some light onto some things for some of the others as well. Thank you for that, Mel. If we can just take the poll away. Thank you. Okay, right. Well, let's get straight on to things and procedures. The GCSE is really just establishing 3 assessment objectives. We've got AO1, AO2 and AO3. These can be found at the back of the specification. So these are the ones that are being tested in this unit. When we come to the internally assessed units, we're really looking at AO2, which is the application of knowledge, because of course the candidates will be applying the knowledge to organisations that you have or they have chosen to actually study. In the evaluation parts of the activities, which we will look at in more detail, that's when we're looking at the AO3 the AO3 assessment objective, which is obviously the higher order one. So when we come to those, I'll look at those and explain to you what it is that we're actually looking for there. So really in the internally assessed units, it is AO2 and AO3 that we are concentrating on. AO1 gets tested on the external units to a much greater degree. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so just to clarify, the internally assessed units are Unit 2, Sales, Promotion and Operations, and Unit 4, Customers and Employment. Both of them carry equal marks. Both of them consist of 4 activities that need to be completed, and each activity is split into 2 or 3 assessment criteria. I am assuming that everybody has been able to download the current tasks for this qualification. They are the same as they were last year, and there are only very, very minor changes from when we first set them right back in 2009. So they are part of the PowerPoint, so don't worry if you don't have them in front of you. But I will also specify which bits have changed, but they're very, very minor changes. So hopefully that will be okay. Right, so without further ado, I'm going to look at planning and research. Possibly because this is the biggest part. It's common to both of the units. For every single activity, you have to or the candidates have to actually produce a plan, and the whole idea obviously is that the candidates do produce the plan. Now, each activity has 60 marks, or is marked out of 60 marks. The planning and research total 24 out of those 60 marks, so it's quite a sizable proportion. The idea behind it is it is a transferable skill. So hopefully, as the candidates get better at doing that, they get better at being organized, they get better at putting structure into their own assignment and take much more responsibility for their own work. And actually, I have to say that those candidates who do tend to produce the best plans do actually tend to produce the best work. So it is working in that way. Now, the planning doesn't have to take part in the 15 hours for the write-up. We would tend to suggest that as you hand the assignment to the candidates, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that you would hand it all to them in one go. Most of you, I would think, would break it down into activities and even subdivide it within the activity itself. As they get that, they start and plan how they're actually going to approach that activity. And that's certainly the way that we've found that it has worked best in the past. When you're very first starting, it may be advisable to give candidates some form of template so that they can actually structure the work around that and understand what they're trying to do. So if you give them some sort of insight into that. But if you look at the marking for planning and research, if you do provide them with a template, they're not really going to be able to show the high level of independent work that's necessary for the 5 to 6 marks to be awarded for that plan. However, to be honest, when they haven't a clue, it's better to give them the template to start with, so that they have some idea of how to structure the work and move forward, and that would be what I would suggest. But then you're going to have to differentiate between your candidates as you move through the unit, and possibly maybe the second time they do a plan, or the third. If they're capable, it would be better for them to produce their own plan, to really take over mastering that on their own, and to break down the activities themselves. What we're looking for from a plan is that they look at what they've got to do. They look at the time scale they've got to do it in, because whenever you give them the activity, we would like to think that you would also give them the dates when they're likely to have the write-up as well. so that they have a clear indication of how far and how long they've got to actually break down, research, plan the work, put it in their folders, structure the folder so that it makes sense to them, so they know where all the work is for the actual write-up time. So, common problems that we have had with planning. Let's have a look. Sometimes, even when candidates are given a template, the template doesn't follow the activities that need to be undertaken. They're looking more at how the specification is structured, and that's not really what we want at this point. We really want them to concentrate on what they're going to have to do for the actual controlled assessment, not what they're going to be covering in the teaching and learning of the whole specification. The more they break down the detail of how they're going to achieve the activity, the more marks you'll be able to award. Some of this will make more sense when we actually start and look at individual candidate work, because you'll see some of the better ones and some of the pitfalls. You'll see some of them that clearly are a bit dumbstruck as to what they're actually trying to do, and they're quite repetitive in what they're trying to do. And some of, you'll see all sorts of different ways of doing it. And hopefully by looking at a variety of those, you'll be able to see the best way for your candidates. Okay. The research element, we want them to use more than one or two types of research. And again, this is one where they quite often just put class notes or website. If they give us a bit more detail, what website, which bits of a website they think will be useful, all sorts of things like that. If they're looking at class notes, they could also look at different textbooks and so forth and so on. So they're using a range of necessary research. Obviously, a lot of the time they'll be going on visits as well. So it'd be really good for them, obviously, to put down the visit, the day that they're going. Maybe they get a talk from somebody there, so if they can put that in as well. When they're doing the plan, they should also put down when they hope to achieve each part of their activity. Because if they do that, then they've got something to actually go back and look at and see if they are achieving their plan and keeping up to date. Because to be fair, it's not a plan, or it's not a working document plan if they don't actually provide updates, either in pen or electronically, by adding an additional column to the end of their plan. We don't really mind, but it's fairly obvious who is actually using it as a working document. Some of them are just going through the motions, and sadly some of them provide a diary of what they did do, which does cause problems, because obviously if they're writing up in the past, that's not a plan, and you can see where our problems arise when we're trying to moderate, because they haven't actually grasped what it is that we're trying to get them to do here. So just bear that in mind, really. Mel, I'm going to hand over here because I want to have a quick look at a plan, and I think it's the first activity that you've got there. So if you could bring it up for me, thank you very much. Now, I don't want to spend too long at this. If you look at the mark, let me grab the mark. I'm just going to grab the mark guidance grid, which is down at the bottom. I'm going to make it full screen, and I'm going to slide it up to the top. Whoops. Here we go. Try again. Okay. I'm hoping that you can see this. It is quite difficult. You might have to peer in. I think there's a little thing that you can make it 100%. Let me try that. Yeah, there we go. This is going to become your Bible. You will be able to get hold of this onwards from the session. But this is what we use in moderation, and it is available online now as well. So as you can see along the top, and we'll go through this each time we look at an activity, regardless of what unit, but obviously for now I'm just concentrating on planning. You can see along the top, horizontally, 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, you can see the same information as you get in the assessment grid in the specification. Now, underneath that, we've added another column, which is indicative content. So for each part of each activity, we've tried to break down what we would anticipate seeing if we were to award those marks. So you can see that in a plan, that if you were going to award 3 to 4 marks, there'll be a plan with some reference to timescales and tasks needing completion. There will be some evidence of updating. Research will be evident and will come from other sources as well as the internet. There will be some notes on the research to indicate some selectivity. So the candidate may well, as we all do, look at research and think, well, actually, that's not very relevant. If they actually put on the plan, I looked at this, but it wasn't as helpful as I thought, that is truly excellent. And, they might have to look at another piece of research to actually get the information that they want. Once they start doing that, they're jumping up towards the 5 to 6 marks. Because if you look at the indicative content under 5 to 6 marks, the plan will have clear aims, objectives with timescales against them. Activity will be clearly broken down and aspects addressed. The plan is likely to be clearly a working document, as we said before, with either electronic or pencil updates. And there'll be explanations of the updates. So as I said, maybe their research wasn't there, maybe they didn't keep up to date because they were ill or the visit was moved, so forth and so on. When it comes to the research, if you're giving them top marks, the research will include information from areas other than the internet. So as we said before, there'll be class notes, contacting the organisation, evidence of selection of relevant information, and rejection of irrelevant information in the plan update. So really, we will be looking at this grid over and over and over again, just to help you understand what it is that we're looking for. If you look very briefly at this plan now, and I don't want you to look at it for very long because we're going to look at quite a few plans this afternoon because it is such an important part. Have a quick glance through that. I'm going to give allow Mel to give you control of it so that you can click on it and get what you want out of it and refer also to the mark guidance grid below. And you can see to the right-hand side, there are 2 questions. Bearing in mind what we've just talked about, if you can just type in the little box underneath and push the little speech bubble, and then it'll actually pop up underneath the relevant point. What do you think the good points are of the plan, and what do you think are the bad points? This plan was actually awarded 4 marks. So keep that in mind, see if you think you agree with those sort of marks, and I'll just give you a few minutes to actually have a think about that. I'll just give you a couple more minutes and then we'll move on. Okay, as you can see, there are quite a few good points to this, and this is only one you know, one A4 sheet. That's something that you're all looking at. Yes, it's specific to the organisation, Ellie, and as Maxine's put, there's clearly defined dates and activity references. Peter, it's good to see you today. Deadlines included, future tense, which is always great to see, and actually the research tasks are broken down. Yep, Jen, good range of activities and research methods given. Lucy, task broken down into the smaller tasks, which is excellent. Alex, again, good to see you. Student states what they intend to do and need to do. Straightforward and doable, Graham says. They use many headings and the updates are included. Yeah. If we look at where the improvements could be, as Ellie said, they seem to have been very busy, or they seem to be going to be very busy on the 23rd of November to get everything done. We would like to see them try and space out what they're trying to do. Angela's saying they're not always quoting their sources, you know, e.g. where they found the definitions of pricing, which is excellent. Maxine, there's no source references. Ellie, one source. The sources could be more specific. Key research questions. Let me just see, Jen. Seem limiting, yeah. More dates when the activity took place. Yes, that would be a good one. Seems a bit basic and more detail would be required, but at least the dates are there. Thanks, Karen. And Alex, yeah, to pick up on Ellie's point, the dates are all the same. Okay, I'm going to stop it there because we want to move on because obviously we've only got limited time this afternoon. But you can see, I'm hoping that that gives you some ideas of of how to help your own candidates move forward. I mean, to be fair, it's a good piece of work. You know, there are definite strengths there. It's definite mid-mark band. But you can already see very quickly how you could improve it, how they could move up into that 5 to 6 mark area. And that's fantastic to see that. In terms of actually getting candidates involved in this from an early stage, I have suggested in the past as maybe, you know, a first sort of icebreaker in a way, is to get them to start planning for something that is part of their life. So it could be, you know, for a party, or it could be going away on you know, going away for an excursion or whatever. So getting them to taking it outside of the actual activities that they have to do for their assignment work, and actually getting them to break down the plan for something that they may be doing generally anyway. And hopefully that'll start to get them to think about, you know, if they were going to have a party, who they're going to invite, where they're going to get the food, where they're going to hold it, what time, etc. and so forth, so that they can understand that they do need to start and think about these things in a logical fashion. But I know it's sometimes more difficult to get them engaged than we can say. But I think the strong point is there's lots of examples that we will be looking at this afternoon, and it is such a sizable amount of the marks that actually if they can get it, then they really are helping themselves. Mel, could you take it back to the PowerPoint for me now? Okay, I've got a few questions coming up here, so I'm just going to have a look at those. Oh, okay. Yep, Lynn, I think Mel sorted your one. I think you're down as Michelle Evans. She's the only person. Okay, that's fine. And Jen, yes, we're planning to use a local zoo, not a text case study as such. That's excellent, Jen. That's absolutely fine. Most centres do use the same organisation. And in fact, I think it allows you to keep much more control over it because you can check that actually you're going to get all the information that the candidates need. And as we all know, they can all follow a same text in an English exam or whatever, and they will all come up with different answers to specific questions. So we're certainly not anticipating that they will all use different case studies or different organisations. And in fact, we do tend to see that the marks are higher with centres that use the same organisation because the teacher has far more control. However, I have also seen centres do extremely well where the candidates have all used their own. So don't be put off by that, but certainly in the first instance, if you're as much of a control freak as I am, I would imagine that you probably prefer to make sure that all candidates are using the same organisation. So I hope that helps. Okay, moving on from planning. Want to look at Unit 2 now, which is the marketing and sales unit. Just a very quick summary of how the candidates did overall in this unit. We were very pleased, and certainly over the last couple of years we found that the marking by assessors is much better than it has been in previous sessions, because they're only marking between or doing 6 marks, which is much better, because in the past, as some of you will know if you did the old spec, they could have to be out of 18 marks or something like that, which actually made it much more difficult for the assessor to understand how the where to pitch the marks as such. So when you've only got 6 marks, assessors do seem to be much more accurate in the marking, which is great. Candidates also, after a lot of worry about controlled assessment and the conditions, they do seem to be taking that on board pretty well and seem to be responding well to that. So that seems to be good. And as we've spoken already, planning and research, I think it'll just take practice, but they do seem to be getting there. And certainly this year, the plans were a lot better than they were in previous years. Okay, so what did the candidates do specifically well? Pricing strategies, they were absolute whizzes on this, because we were concerned that using the marketing terminology they would struggle with that. They haven't. They've been able to apply it. They're using real, quite tough marketing terminology, and it's been absolutely fantastic. So that's great. The evaluation of promotional materials in Activity 2 was often detailed and applied, so that was great. The material produced in Activity 3, targeted, great again. And again, the evaluation in Activity 4, their actual evaluations seem to be quite sound. But we want to go through and look at it section by section, just so as you quickly get to grips as to what you should be concentrating on. So for those of you, just to update you, this is what Unit 2 Activity 1 is. Once they've done the plan, in the actual 15 hours of write-up time, they've got to present information about the aims and objectives of the chosen organisation, the places used by chosen organisation to sell products and services, and the pricing strategies. So there's 3 separate things they need to actually present information on. Now, when they're presenting information, we're not looking at evaluation. This is pure AO2 stuff, where they're applying their knowledge to the organization. So it's sort of description, explanation, but we're not bothered whether it's description, it's serious, or explanation. It's seriously just presenting information that's relevant and applied on these 3 factors. Okay, so let's look at some of the areas that they could improve on. When we're looking at aims, it would be good if the candidates presented a range, because sometimes they tend to focus on just financial or mission statement. It would actually be quite good if they looked at different types, and if they actually put headings in, so we know that they know the difference between them. And it makes it easier for the moderator, definitely, to see that they have looked at a range, and also it makes them think more about whether, because quite often mission statement aims and objectives can look as if they're flying in the face of the financial ones, because they'll be looking totally at customer service and wanting to present an excellent customer interface, whereas financial obviously be to make as much money as possible if they're a private enterprise. And sometimes those two initially would look as if they're going in opposite directions to one another. So it's useful if the candidates sort of put headings in so that they can actually look at a range. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The second part, they've got to talk about the place, haven't they? They've got to look at places where the chosen organisation sells products and services. Quite often they concentrate on geographical location. We're really not wanting that so much. We want them to look at the chain of distribution, so where people can buy it. So if, for example, it's Alton Towers, which seems to be quite a popular one, where they can buy the tickets from. So they can buy them face to face on the door, they can buy them over the phone, they can buy them on the internet, so forth and so on. So looking at the selling situations, if they concentrate on that chain of distribution, it helps them provide more information on the selling situations. If they do look at geographical location, what I don't really want them to tell me, you know, it's in the middle of the country in Derbyshire or something. If they tell me it's near major conurbations, on major motorway routes, so that we can see that it's easy, or in the case of Alton Towers, difficult to get to because it's not on a main trunk road or whatever, that's acceptable. But they don't need to do the place, you know, as in where it actually is. This is a case where they've only got so much time, so we like to see selectivity, you know, so they need to select the information that they need to put down rather than put everything down and then we pick out the bits that are relevant, because to be honest, if they're really top level students, they should be able to pick out what is relevant for the 5 to 6 marks. So hopefully that helps. We've mentioned already the pricing strategy terminology was well done, and they can really demonstrate they fully understand these by their applications. So make sure that they are showing their full understanding of the terms by using specific examples that are relevant to the organisation that you're talking about. Okay, I'm just going to pick up on Sampath's question here. Let me have a look. From Sampath, can students who did test in May 2012 repeat only controlled assessment in January 2013? We only moderate the internal units in June. So they will only be able to submit controlled assessment in June. So I'm hoping that answers the question there. Okay. Okay, moving on. Hopefully that makes sense. Areas for improvement for candidates for activity 1. If we look at activity 2, research and present information about the target markets and then evaluate the effectiveness of promotional techniques and materials. This is a strange one because activity 2 has 18 marks attached to it. So after the planning and research, there's 6 marks for presenting information on target markets and 6 marks for evaluating promotional techniques and materials used by the organisation. For some strange reason, it's becoming less now, but certainly in the first year, a lot of centres didn't present information on target markets, which made it quite difficult because obviously there are 6 marks allocated for that section of the activity. As moderators, we did go through the promotional techniques and materials used and picked out any parts that were relevant to the target market. But when the assessor had actually awarded 5 to 6 marks for presenting information and there wasn't a separate heading on that, it did cause issues with centres. So please be aware of that, and hopefully that will, you will know and know that there's 2 sections in addition to the planning and research for this particular activity. Those centres who did produce information did really well there, and they tended to present, to be able to apply it to the organisation very successfully. Obviously, if they just put children, it was fine, but the more detail they could put in, so is it small children, is it 10 to 11-year-olds, so forth and so on. So if they break it down into much more detail, that will give them more marks. Okay. When we look at evaluating promotional techniques and materials, to get 5 to 6 marks, they need to address both promotional techniques and materials and apply them to the organisation. Quite often they looked at materials, which means they're doing half of the question. So theoretically, really, they should be only getting half the marks, and actually that would be what would happen. We would be looking at them even if they did extremely well and the evaluation was A1 fantastic, they would still be in the mid mark band because they haven't actually looked at promotional techniques. A common problem with the promotional technique bit was they did evaluate, but they didn't apply it to the organisation as well as they were able to apply their evaluation of materials. So just be aware of that when you're going through. This is a quick go through because we're going to look at some work in a minute. Activity 3, for your chosen organisation, plan and produce a piece of promotional material for a target market of your choice. And the second part is evaluate the finished product and suggest improvements. Okay. So first of all, they had to do their plan, and this time it's plan and design. So just it might be worth taking a little note on that. This is the only plan for Unit 2 that is slightly different from the other two. When they need to plan who they're going to target, how they're going to do that, what they're going to, what the material is going to be about. But also within their plan, they need to have some sort of mock-up, not the finished article, but some sort of mock-up of what it is they're going to produce. So they could write an A4 about what they're going to include on that, or they could have a little design where you don't necessarily show the picture, but they have little boxes on a leaflet sort of saying this is where I'm going to put the map, this is where I'm going to put my strapline logo, so forth and so on. So just bear that in mind. It's the only plan which has a slight change in it. Okay. Right, so for the promotional material itself, some of them, let's have a look at some of the common problems here. They need to include the necessary information. Now that does tend to mean that if they produce merchandise, and merchandise read mugs or whatever, mouse mats, or at least those are slightly bigger so you can fit more information on. If you choose if the candidates choose merchandising, does make it very difficult for them to include all the necessary information to make the material effective, because they can't actually show all the prices that are relevant to the target market they're going for. They can't really show how you can get in touch with the organisation, or maps, details of how to get to it, or whatever. So personally, I would stick with leaflets in the first instance. And to be honest, I know some of them get really hyped up on this task and you don't want to destroy their creativity, but let them do a leaflet first, or get them to do a leaflet first, and then let them go off and do whatever they want to do, possibly in their own time or whatever. And then they can come back and you can go through with them and look at which piece of material is likely to gain them the best marks. Okay. Now, Peter's got a question here, so I'm just going to take that. Is the design and draft material not part of the 15 hours then? The plan and design is not part of the 15 hours because that's the planning activity, but actually doing the material itself is Okay, so they're going to have to be going some to actually get 2 different materials in there in the 15 hours. So just be aware of that. And then from Jen, I've moved from BTEC to GCSE. How much support can we give these students? Are we able to mark and then give them formative assessment to help them improve their grade? Now, this is a difficult area that, you can help them to some degree, Jem, but you cannot keep marking it and then send it back and then go back. When you're looking at it in the controlled assessment environment, they can talk to one another. You can talk to them and say, do you think you should be considering, do you think that you've considered everything there? But you can't really take it in, make comments, and then hand it back out again for them to do again. So you don't have as much leeway as you do have with BTEC. So I'm hoping that helps you. By the time they're doing their controlled assessment, that's actually it, which is why the planning time is so important. The planning time and the way they structure their folders, because obviously then you could talk to them at that point and say, what are you going to do here? What are you going to do there? But once they're in that controlled environment, they really need to be thinking for themselves so that we can differentiate at that point. So hopefully that answers that. Okay. Right, so to go back to the leaflet thing, quite often they put the necessary information in, but they didn't actually sell the product, because don't forget they are into sales and promotion here. So we wanted them to consider the language that they could use that would be relevant to the target market they're going for. They can think about logos, they can think about strap lines, how they're actually going to entice the target market to buy, okay? And that's really what moves them into the higher mark bands, okay, because then they're actually understanding how they're actually going to sell the product, and hopefully that'll move them on. Okay, oh, sorry, just before this, the other thing is when they actually are looking and evaluating their finished material, this is actually quite difficult for them to do this at this point, and I do appreciate that. But don't forget, they need to suggest some improvements, because it does say evaluate and suggest improvements. So please don't let them forget that bit, because it's quite difficult if they do the evaluation and then don't do the actual improvement bit. So let them get on with that and remind them to put in some suggestions for improvement. Okay, activity 4. This is the operations part of the unit. Because it's called sales, promotions, and operations. So when you're looking at the technology and technological change that's affected the organization, it's not just the marketing and promotions side or the sales and promotions side. This can be anything. So if you are, I keep referring to theme park, but it seems to be one of the most common. You could be looking at the operations, at the actual rides themselves, and so forth and so on, how that technology has changed. So don't get too bogged down with just thinking about the marketing and how technology has changed marketing. Obviously, you've got quite a lot to talk about there anyway, but you can open it up to other areas of the organization. So hopefully that helps with that. Okay, so this activity should be broken down into 2 sections after the planning and research. Candidates, they should really present, I've put here should evaluate, but it's quite difficult. Really, they should be presenting the changes that have occurred over time due to technology in the organisation. And when we're looking at over time, don't go mad. I'm not looking for, since television or telephone came on or whatever like that. I mean, the last 20 years will be fine, because there seems to be quite a lot of changes just within that time itself. And secondly, once they've done that, they need to evaluate the effect these changes have had. So present the information on the changes that have actually occurred. But then if they actually put, look at how that's had an impact on costs, on profit, on staff numbers, on training, because a lot of, well, as we are right now, instead of face-to-face training, it's much more, they pick it up and let it go and look at it in their own time over the internet as we are here. And so forth and so on. So there's two distinct parts to this activity, and hopefully that will help them break it down to a much greater degree. Okay, so hopefully that's taken you on a very brief visit through Unit 2. We're now going to look at a piece of material, candidate A for Unit 2. So hopefully Mel will be able to get up all the different bits of material for that, Mel. And we'll go through, we've got different polls at different times, okay? So we're going to look at activity 1 first, which is the plan and research, and then the present information. I know just ignore this activity 1, plan and research. It's present information at the top there. You can see that this candidate was awarded by the centre 4 marks for planning and 4 marks for the presenting information. And luckily they've broken it down so we can see that this is activity 1, so it's great. Okay, and have a look through here. I'm going to hand it over to you in a minute so you can just briefly go through this for yourself. What I want you to do is have a quick look and see whether you agree with the 4 marks, whether you think it should be higher, whether you think it should be the same or the lower. So you're taking over the role of moderator. Now if I make this full screen again, you can see this is the mark grid. So hopefully this will help you because you've got indicative content for each section. Okay, so here under the present information, if you were going to award it 5 to 6 marks, the aims and objectives would cover at least 3 different types, be considerable detail, application, sentence of theory, but it would be generally linked and applied to the organisation. Places would cover channels of distribution and at least 2 or 3 types of selling situation in detail, and pricing strategies considered will demonstrate clearly that the student understands the terminology and can apply it. So make use of this here to help you with your decision making as well. Okay, so over to you very quickly because I want to go through all, the next 4. You will have just get a gut for it and be aware of the sorts of things that you're going to be looking for, really. But have a go because we're going to go through all 4 activities, and obviously you'll have access to this outside of the presentation as well, so you can go through it in more detail in your own time. So hopefully you've got control now as well. Okay, I think we'll finish this activity. I appreciate that for some of you this will be the first time of doing this because you've only just literally started in September, so it does seem a bit unfair. And I want to have a look at another couple of activities as well before we take a break. So I'm going to push you. We're going to shoot through these fairly rapidly. Actually, quite an interesting score if we publish the results. It's a it's a pretty similar to the planning and research. Some of you say you would have gone lower than 4. About 50%, 54% say they would have gone lower, and about 45% say they would have kept it at 4 marks. As moderators, we did keep it at 4 marks because there's a relevant breakdown of the tasks. Variety of different sources of research, and there are dates and there are updates. So it's very similar to the indicative material that we actually talked about. So yes, we would tend to give that. The present information, 3 aims are presented and discussed, limited reference to the chain of distribution, which you've probably all picked up, but the pricing strategy is actually still quite a strength. So again, we did leave that at 4, and in fact 9 of you have said, not, which is a sizable amount, 75% said yes, you would agree with that. So that's fantastic. Mel, if we can bring up activity 2 from the same candidate. Okay, so you can see, whoops. In fact, we've got the whole thing here, which is great, except it's round the wrong way, but I think you can swap it round with the little arrow at the pointer at the top there. So I think what we'll do is you're only going to get about 5 minutes and then we'll go through this. Or I tell you what I could do is leave this up. You can have a quick look through it, or you can take a break. And at the end, in 10 minutes time, we'll come back and I'll explain what we did give it for this. As you can see, for this one, I don't want you to look at the plan. I just want you to look at present information and evaluate and suggest improvements. So have a look at these 2 parts of activity 2. If you get a bit of time, go through activity 3, because we do look at the planning for that one, and we did change the planning. So have a look at the plan for activity 3, because that'll come up in a little while, and see what you think about that as well. But I think now as well, if I pick up again at 5:10 and we'll spend 5 minutes going through what the candidate did actually get, and if you need a comfort break, just go, because you'll always have access to have a look at this on your own afterwards. Because I appreciate that we are being pushed for time tonight because we have only got 2 hours. So hopefully if I leave this and shut up and go away, and I'll come back in 10 minutes and we'll pick it up from there. Thank you. Okay, I'm hoping that we're all ready and refreshed to keep going for another 50 minutes, hour, and move forward on to Unit 2. Looking quickly at the polls for Activity 2, most of you, for the presenting information about target markets, are suggesting that the marks should be the same as the assessor, which is actually what we did, because they did present information on 5 target markets, and all of that information was applied to the organisation, and there was some detail. So it wasn't brilliant and there could have been improvement, but we did actually agree the 3 marks there. Interestingly, when we look at the evaluate and suggest improvements, about 1/3 of you have suggested, I mean, the centre gave it 3, and we gave it 3, but 1/3 of you have suggested that we could have gone higher. Just remember, this bit is evaluate and suggest improvements. The weakness was really that there were no suggested improvements throughout the work. If you're concerned about your own candidates falling into the same trap, you could always use some sort of template, really, where you're forcing them to make a judgment to help them evaluate, and then put at the end suggest improvements so that they don't miss out that part of the task. Because obviously, if they don't address the task, it's difficult to agree the marks if the evidence is just not there at all. The other thing with this is the AO3 part, so it is the more difficult part. And there is some evaluation of promotional techniques, but it's not always applied to the organisation. And also the materials, they've chosen 4 different leaflets, so they're all from the same technique. We'd like to see some materials being used from other techniques, so maybe they could get hold of, a direct mailing, under direct marketing or some sort of sales promotion or whatever, and actually evaluate that so that we get, particularly if you're going to award top marks, so we get an understanding that they do understand the difference between techniques and materials. Moving very swiftly on, because I don't think we've got time really to let you have a look at the other activities. This is very much a C candidate, that everything about them suggests they know what they're doing, they're very solid, but there isn't anything there to get, sort of, there's nothing exciting, or you don't get the overwhelming sensation that they understand some of the more difficult and complex ideas. So this is very much your typical C candidate, so bear that in mind when you're looking through. In activity 3, obviously just very swiftly to go through, there was that candidate, the centre, gave it 3 marks. We actually thought the plan was good enough to give 4 marks to. But other than that, we tended to agree with the assessor all the way through here. So it was a well-marked piece of work. And in the main, actually, that's what we found, that because you've got fewer marks to play with, it's actually easier. And hopefully you find the mark guidance grid as useful as we do, because it really does give you the information that you need with that indicative content, because it gives you so much more evidence of what it is, and you can really compare what we're expecting with the piece of work that you're actually looking at the time. I'll also be explaining at the end some other help that we can provide if you're still struggling, particularly those people who have just started with this qualification this September. However, time is not on our side, so Mel, can we get rid of all of this and we'll go back to the PowerPoint, and we'll start on Unit 4, I think, so I hope that's okay. Okay. Again, Unit 4, very similar. Actually, the candidates performed really very similarly on both units. It was quite incredible. We're just always fascinated by that, but it always happens. Now, again, with this activity, you obviously need to download the assessment tasks relevant to the year. I will go through them, and you'll see again that not much has changed since the start of this qualification, but I will point in any differences that do arise. Now, with this one as well, you have to make your choice of organizations that you're going to use, because you've got to use 2 different ones. Now, it does say that you can choose a facility, an attraction, or a destination. So you've got to choose one or 2 facilities, destinations, or attractions. So it's entirely up to you. However, I have to say that if you can, unless you're very, very sure about the destination, I would stay away from it, because it's quite difficult to get a grasp of a destination. It's so wide, and it might be better to stick with a local leisure centre and a visitor attraction, or some sort of mix of those 2, or 2 visitor attractions. I don't really mind. We do find that centres who use destinations in this particular unit sometimes run into trouble with it. So it's just a little hint. Doesn't doesn't mean don't use it. If you've got a fantastic destination and you know you've got all the information that you require, then please go with it, because it's always interesting and the students seem to really love it. But just from, if you're new to this and you're not entirely sure straight away, I would stick with the other two types. But if you've got a good destination, got all the information you require, please go for it. Okay. Okay, so this is a summary of what they did well, and you can see that again the evaluations seem to be going quite well, and also activity 4, the job files, they all seem to do that quite well actually. So that was really good. Okay, moving swiftly on, the first activity in this unit. Research and present information about the appeal and popularity of one visitor attraction, tourist destination, or leisure facility. Okay, so there are really a couple of things they need to look at here. We split this activity down into 3 parts. First bit, they need to present information on the products and services that give the facility or attraction its appeal. Now, some candidates sort of write down everything that the facility or attraction offers, or destination offers, but don't actually then take it that one stage further and link it to the appeal, because obviously different things will appeal to different types of people. We're not looking at needs of people or anything, but don't let them get into that trap of just putting down stuff about products and services and not linking it to the appeal, because that's where they're going to lose marks. The second part are the appeal in terms of repeat business, visitor numbers and trends. In order for the candidates to do this well, they need to have access to visitor numbers, okay, and to look at the trends. Is it going up? Are visitor numbers going up? Are visitor numbers going down? Because it actually gives them something to talk about if they go ahead and look at that. As you can see, because I'm getting a bit tongue-tied here, but you can see what I'm saying. If they don't have access to those figures, this piece of work tends to be a bit woolly, and they don't really get it. And they certainly don't access the top mark bands because they don't really cover the repeat business and visitor numbers, because they haven't got access to them, is what I'm really trying to say. They can also use the numbers to look at popularity in terms of customer satisfaction and reputation, because obviously if the numbers are going up, then the reputation should be going up with it, because obviously they're selling it to other people. I have seen candidates go on TripAdvisor and talk about the comments that are put up there. If you have a good relationship with the organization, hopefully they will also give you some idea of the customer feedback that they get themselves from that. So that should also help, okay? But if you cannot get these figures, it makes it very difficult for the candidates to really apply this question properly. So hopefully that solves that one for you. Activity 2. Now, this is one where, please note, you see at the bottom, using your second chosen visitor attraction. So you've got to choose 2. So the first activity you use 1, the second activity you use the other one. You've got to present information and then evaluate the factors which influence or motivate people to choose to visit the chosen destination, facility, attraction. Now, this is in 2009, we only wanted the candidates to evaluate the external factors, but actually now candidates are free to evaluate either the personal factors or the external factors that apply for them, okay? Because so many of them were looking at personal factors anyway, that we thought, well, we'll work with them rather than penalize them. What we are hoping is that they will pick those ones that are relevant to the I'm just going to say the facility, otherwise I keep saying the same words, destination, blah, blah, blah. So if we just say facility, that to make sure that they are looking at the ones that are particularly relevant to their facility. So first of all, they need to present information about the factors. So that there's 18 marks for this activity, 6 marks for the planning, 6 marks for presenting information about the factors which are relevant, and then 6 marks for evaluating the ones that have the most influence and seem to motivate people. So you present information about the ones that are important and then evaluate how they motivate and influence people to visit. So you've got 2 separate sections there. And I've seen it done in 2 different ways. Sometimes they do all the presentation in one part and then go back and evaluate it afterwards. Sometimes they present information on one factor and then evaluate it at that time, and so forth and so on. So it's entirely up to you, but what you're looking for and what the moderator will be looking for is where they're getting the 6 marks for the presenting information and where they're getting the 6 marks for evaluating, because they've got to look at both. But don't get too bogged down about whether it's external or personal. They can do them all, they can, or choose the ones that are most relevant to them, but hopefully that solves that. Okay, I'm going to whip through the next 2 activities and then I'll take the questions that are coming up at the moment. Okay. Activity 3, research the types of customers who visit one of your chosen examples. So you can choose either one of the organizations you've used for either activity 1 or 2 and use them for this one. And then evaluate how well the needs of these customers are met at your chosen example. Now, we always say that if we look at that, when they're researching the needs, it would be good if they establish what those needs could be generally, regardless of where the customers are going. So what sort of needs would people with special needs have generally, regardless of visiting Alton Towers or the local leisure centre. So look at it widely. What is it that they need, okay, generically? Because once the candidates understand what their possible needs could be, they can then evaluate by looking at whether the organisation meets those needs. Because if they don't understand what the needs could possibly be, their evaluation tends to be pretty woolly. Okay, again, you could perhaps move them to evaluation by looking at templates, what's good, what's bad, and what could be improved. Okay, again, we're going to look at this activity in a few minutes, because we'll look at activity 3 as the example for unit 4. But hopefully you can see what I'm getting at there. Then for activity 4, you use the other organisation that you haven't used for 2 activities already. Okay, and you've got to plan and research a job file for 3 different job roles within your chosen facility organisation destination, and each job role should be described in terms of the skills and qualities required. The second part, because this is an 18 marker, I'm sure, they've got to actually go through and then pick the ones that are most relevant, that most important, and explain or justify why they chose those ones as being the most important ones. Okay, if the areas for improvement here, if you're choosing 3 specific job roles, it's best if you choose 3 different levels. So looking at it here, you've got the lifeguard, the receptionist, and the leisure centre manager. Because if you choose them all at a similar, like receptionist or, I don't know, if you don't make them wide apart, they're too similar. You need one that at least that's a managerial role, because then the skills are going to be very different and the actual requirements are going to be very different. So it gives focus, and it shows us as assessors and moderators that the candidates do understand that different things do appear. Okay, important at this moment. Okay, So candidates should ensure that the justification for their job role choices is appropriate and relevant for the skills and qualities described. So a template asking why. We do use these templates, or we suggest these use of templates, particularly for, the candidates who aren't high flyers, whatever, who struggle a bit. We have found that it does help to put them where they should, to help them structure their answers and such. So hopefully that'll help you too. Okay, Maxine, let's have a look at your question. Yeah, Maxine has written, new course in September. I'm using 2 organisations for Unit 2. I had it confirmed by email that that was acceptable. But I'm confused, as you say, 2 organisations for Unit 4. Sorry, Maxine, certainly don't mean to confuse you at all. Yes, you can use up to 2 organisations for Unit 2. I'm sorry, I should probably have said that at the time, so forgive me for that. You can. There's no up to 2, so you can use 1 all the way through, or you can use 2 across the different activities. I only want you to use 1 per activity, so in the similar way to Unit 4. But yes, you can use up to 2 organisations. The main reason for that with Unit 2, going back very briefly, is that in that activity 4, where you're looking at technology, some organisations don't lend themselves so well to that activity if you've chosen a particularly small organisation to study for the other 3 tasks or activities. So that was the idea behind using it. So yes, it's perfectly acceptable, Maxine, and it's not a problem at all. And then obviously for Unit 4, you definitely do have to use 2 organisations, as I've said, as you go through. So hopefully that solves that one. Okay. What I want to look at now, because I do want to move on and look at other things, we're going to look at a piece of coursework for a candidate a piece of coursework from a candidate for this June, and I'm going to talk you through the first little bit, but then we'll look at activity 3 together, I think, and look at the plan specifically. But I'm just going to talk you through the first wee bit so that we can get everything through and done on time. So Mel, if I could have candidate B for 5LTO4, that would be fantastic. Okay, so to look at the grid again, which I'm going to look at down here, I'm going to try and make it full screen in a minute, but it doesn't seem to want to. Oh yeah, here we go. Again, we have the same grid for Unit 4 as we have for Unit 2. So you can see that we've got indicative content for each of the different activities. Obviously, the plan and research will be the same as for activity 2. But then we've actually split it down for the present information in terms of the products and how they give appeal and repeat business and so forth and so on. So you can see again what it is that we're looking for when you give those marks all the way through. So hopefully you can see that we are trying to help you and ourselves by actually making it very clear where these things go. Okay, so looking at the actual piece of work, try and get this plan up. It's not gonna, I think I'll have to take it down slightly. 75, yep. Okay, so this was the plan for activity 1. Okay, and I'll slide you through there in a minute. What this candidate has done that you can possibly see now that we get it up is that central, she has broken down the task. I'm trying to get down up to the top. I'm saying she, I'm not actually aware if it's a he or a she, but you can see what I have found out should more or less written up all her research in that one column. So it looks as if there's been a tremendous breakdown of the activities, but actually it's not what we want, because we don't need to know all the research that she's found in her actual plan. And it's a bit sort of off-putting to find all that in the middle, if you see what I mean. I mean, she has, or he has given some breakdown and some dates, but again, they all seem to be the 29th of March, so they're all very busy again. And the updates, some of them are relevant, but not always. So what originally looked like quite a detailed plan is actually not addressing what we really want it to in a plan, if you see what I mean. Because that central column is just her notes or his notes that should be appearing in the research folder that we don't want to see for moderation, really. So it goes on and on and on and on. And sadly, the centre awarded that 4 marks, but we did take that down to 3, purely because the research evidence, as I said, makes it look much more detailed than it actually is. So sadly, we did actually take that one down because it's not approaching what we wanted to. I'm just going to try and turn. First of all, we've got a quick introduction to the organisation, and then there is evidence of what makes the Flamingo Park appealing for families, teenagers, and so forth. They are addressing this. A candidate does actually refer to measuring customer satisfaction. And I think this one, yeah, just down the bottom there, how they measure customer satisfaction. But the reference about visitor numbers is much weaker, and it seems to be missing this. We did actually, because of that reference to customer satisfaction and because of the particular tying up of the products and services to the appeal, we did actually agree with the assessor who gave 4, because there is quite a bit of detail to this and they have laid it out. But you now know that actually if they had looked at visitor numbers and the candidate had made reference to that, it would have meant that we could have moved the marks up much more. So that was a bit of a shame. Okay, so I'm just moving it down to activity 2. Again, as I say, I know time's not on our side, so we are belting through this, but you will have access to have a look at it yourselves in more detail with that grid, which I hope you find as useful as I do and all moderators do. So hopefully that will be a big help to you. So here the candidate has written up about the personal factors and linked it through to the organisation, so that's good, gone right the way through. In fact, there's quite a bit of detail to this if we go down. She looked at culture, gender, she's giving it marks and actually evaluating whether she thinks it's particularly important or not, he or she is, looking at household types, looking at social group, looking at specific needs, which, yeah, another factor that can come into play, disposable income. So as you can see, a lot of personal factors and then moving on to the external. So it's a good piece of work, this actually. Current issues, trends, so forth and so on. The assessor awarded this 5, and we agreed with it because not only is there a lot of information, you can see, I get my pointer out, there's a bit about 7 to 10 or whatever. Oops, what's happened there? Switch the pointer on. There was quite a bit of evaluation in it as well. That. What I would say is it is quite a good piece of work for you to look at in your leisure time, because it was awarded 41 marks in total, and it's a good B, this piece of work, so it's probably worthwhile having a look at and seeing what you think of it and what you make of it and how you would compare it with your own candidate's work. we were going to look at activity 3 and look at why the marks for planning and research were downgraded for the activity 3. But let me have a look at that so if I can tell you why. Do you remember when we looked at the plan for activity 1? Some of you who were able to see that right at the very beginning. I know Angela's had trouble with this all the way through, so sorry about that, Angela. It was the candidate had written up all of her research or his research in that one column. They continued to do that in activity 3. And there was only one update to the plan, but sadly the centre had awarded 5 marks for that. And I think as you looked at planning activities earlier here, we did have a look at that. Actually, if you have, I think you can have control now. So if you can get to the plan for activity 3 and have a look for that just for yourself for a couple of minutes, and then you see if you can get it to there. Have a look and see if you agree. We downgraded it from a 5 to a 3. So have a quick look yourselves and see if you agree. Okay, I'm hoping that that has worked for you, but in case it hasn't, I'm going to move on because I don't want you falling asleep on me. When you do get access to it for yourselves, have a good look at activity 4 as well, because the candidate did get 5 marks, 4 marks and 5 marks. So it's a good piece of work for you to look at and use when you're preparing your own candidates as well. But I'm sorry that we've had the technical problems that we have had with it, because it is a good piece of work, which is why I particularly chose this one for you. Support. Yes, there's a subject page on the Edexcel website, so have a look at that. OSCAR. We're in the process of writing up OSCAR commentaries. OSCAR, for those of you who are new to this, it's we take pieces of coursework from the previous year. You know, an A candidate, a B candidate, a C candidate, and we actually have a detailed commentary saying why those candidates got the marks. So not only will you have access to the work that's available here, because I think there's 3 candidates for each unit here with commentaries. These OSCAR ones are in addition to those, so you will have access to 6 in total. And your examinations officer will be able to get you onto the OSCAR site, hopefully. You don't have to, you can just access the materials there if you want to, but it is quite a useful thing to do, and there are quite high scoring pieces of work on there, so it might help you to understand what it is that we're looking for there. There is obviously the book, which some of you will have, and the other thing that I wanted to bring your attention to is Ask the Expert. This is something that you can come into and pose questions, anything you want, relevant obviously to GCSE Leisure and Tourism. But I am the expert who picks up on those questions. So anything that you are unsure of or you just want clarification, I think Maxine might have used this one when she asked about whether you could use 1 or 2 organisations for Unit 2. That's the place to come in and ask, and then we can answer any queries that you've got straight away. So do make good use of the Ask the Expert thing there, because it is there to help you and to make sure that we answer any queries that you've got. So please include that, no problem at all. Okay, finally, it's just any more questions that you have. Now, I know this is because we've got 15 minutes here, so I wanted to take any of your questions or anything that you're not particularly sure of, because I know that that was very fast paced. And I know that some of you are just started in September, so you might have loads of questions that you're thinking, well, I don't really get that, or I've just introduced enough to sort of confuse. So please take this time to pose me the questions, because I will be here for another 15-20 minutes, and I'll happily take any more that come up. But other than that, I'm hoping that that helped you with some of your queries. But send your email on the list, and send me your questions that you've got regarding anything that we've discussed tonight. Jen has sent me through a question here. Jen, I have started the course this September. I've looked online. Is the coursework for use from September 2011 to May the 13th the one that I want, even though I am claiming certification in 2014? Jen, I would keep an eye out for that. It's unlikely, well, it's being reviewed at the moment. But if you are concerned about that, what I would do is come through on Ask the Expert in a couple of weeks' time, and we should have the answer to that. I think it's unlikely, but I cannot guarantee that just at the moment. But as you can see, from 2009 to here, it hasn't changed that much. So I don't, I would like to say it won't change again, but I cannot guarantee that. So if you come back in a couple of weeks, that should be clarified then. I'd like to say thank you very much for attending today's session. I hope it has helped. And obviously, if you've got any further queries, just come through on Ask the Expert. We're always able to help, and if we can't help, we can put you in touch with the person who can. But thank you very much for attending today, and everything. It's been a pleasure to actually work with you this afternoon. Have a good evening. Bye bye.